You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, and welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing?
We're doing good. We are, 3.5 weeks away from college football starting, which means we are about 4.5 weeks away or so before the NFL really starts cooking here, boys. So we are in draft season. We are doing some more player rankings. It is Tuesday night. I get to hang out with you guys. If you know, the Harbaugh speech, who's got it better than us? Nobody.
It's the last July show, which means if you've stuck with us through the summer, one, kudos to you, and two, when the calendar flips to August, that's when it gets really fun in terms of fantasy football. So we are almost there, getting through the dog days of summer, and before we know it, actual meaningful football will be played at all levels, from your high school to your college to your professionals. It'll be here before we know it.
Absolutely. And this is the last night that we're going to get into kind of breaking down individual players, and then next week we're going to turn the corner and we're going to start really hitting up the draft strategies and really bringing that thing home. And those are some very, very fun episodes. Cannot wait to get into that. Before we start getting into any of the players that we're looking to hit up tonight, any news notes, anything like that we want to hit up?
Camps are open. That's
Camps
fun.
are open. Yeah.
Right. We know who the Chargers starting quarterback is going to be for the Hall of Fame game. Do you guys know who the Chargers starting quarterback is going to be for the Hall of Fame game?
If you're asking the question, it's got to be Easton Stick.
You would think, but it's not. Because Easton Stick doesn't play for the Chargers anymore.
Oh, okay.
No. Who is?
It's Trey Lance. It's the guy who replaced him at North Dakota State. Trey Lance plays for the Chargers now. He's going to start. I think Easton, he's on a roster somewhere, but I don't know. He's
probably buried in the Browns organization somewhere.
I don't think he's one of the Browns. One of the Browns quarterbacks. Where is he? He's with the Falcons. So, he's got that going for him, right behind Kirk Cousins. Hey, there are worse ways to make a living than being the third quarterback on an NFL team.
It's like the bullpen catcher, man, right?
Right.
Like you can be the third quarterback on an NFL team and make the roster.
Yeah.
Those game checks clear.
They do. Again, worse ways to make a living. So,
right.
Yeah. But that should be fun. That game's coming up here actually pretty quickly. That's the best part about August is that we actually do get like a preseason game here with the Hall of Fame game. I think it might be.
See, I should have known though that if you were asking that question specifically around that it was a former North Dakota State quarterback.
Guys, the game is on Thursday.
Oh wow, it's this week.
2 days away.
It's on Thursday. It's the Chargers and the Lions, and
Thursday.
I promise you, I'm going to be watching it.
Yes.
I promise you, I'm going to be watching it. I will be in a hotel room. There is not going to be anything else going on. I promise you, I will be watching that game.
Yeah, hopefully it's on NBC, so you're gonna be able to get it. Glorious! What a good Thursday.
This made my week even better. I was already happy. Now I'm over happy.
You're gonna see a bunch of dudes trying to make a roster.
It's still better than the USFL.
That's the truth. Hey, there was a bit of fantasy news that kind of came out, I think, between our last episodes. And that is, like I said, camp's open, and already we thought, the team had lost their starting quarterback. Now, for what it's worth, he's not, I don't think, looked favorably upon, at least from this show, as a number one option at quarterback. However, he is a starting quarterback in this league. And if you're playing on a super flex, that is valuable, right? Like that's valuable to have a starting quarterback in this league. So the good thing is Justin Fields avoided serious injury, right? But he is going to play with like a plastic cap over the next couple of weeks to protect his toe. And I just think that it is incredible, and it's happened before, it'll happen again, that a single toe can just derail an entire season for somebody. It is wild to think that the single toe can just ruin everything.
Carries a lot of weight on that toe. Burst and change of direction and just general downforce. There's a lot of pressure on that toe.
Well, and especially for the way you perceive him scoring points in fantasy, it's going to come mostly from the legs and that toe work, not necessarily the arm work. So
yeah, so he has avoided serious injury, and now we kind of wait to see who doesn't avoid serious injury, right? And this is kind of the worst part about where your draft is, right? If you're drafting early in August, right, you have to take the good with the bad here. And, you know, sometimes if you're drafting in early August, you can get players at a massive discount, right? Like you can get them at a massive discount if you're first in, right? On that same token, though, you can derail your whole season if you're drafting early and you get Christian McCaffrey, right? Like that's an example from last year, and even with drafting late, because I think we all thought Christian McCaffrey was still going to play heading into week 1, and then he didn't. But that's what can happen is your first overall pick gets hurt. The nature of the beast, but it's a game you have to play.
Right, you're tiptoeing through the tulips and trying to avoid landmines at the same time. So
yeah,
it's very interesting proposal there. Any other news notes we want to hit up before we start talking about some football players?
So a couple things, right? Well, and this is all football related. Justin Jefferson dealing with a mild hamstring strain, right? So something to keep an eye on. Soft tissue injuries are potentially troublesome. And 2 years ago, the hamstring was a deal for Jefferson, caused him to miss some time in 23. Joe Mixon is expected to be out for a period of time, dealing with a reoccurring foot issue that started last year. They thought they had it fixed, and it's creeping its way back up. So be mindful for Joe Mixon. Hello, Mr. Nick Chubb. Let's see here. Stafford is going to take it easy. His back is sore. Stafford has had back issues throughout his career. Largely that was because, Detroit failed to protect him, and he just took so many massive hits. So be careful of Stafford's back. And then on the good news.
Oh, I got one more bad news before you get to good news.
All right. Go to the bad news.
Isaiah Likely rolled his ankle and is going to miss some time. We'll see how bad it is. They're waiting an MRI tomorrow.
Is that bad news though? Or does it give us some clarity from our
players?
Well, bad news if you're an Isaiah Likely owner.
Maybe.
I mean, if you were drafting tight end 24 and hoping that he was tight end 1, you had bigger issues with your draft already. Just saying. Not saying, just saying.
Just clarity, right? And then some extensions, notably one from the Cowboys, not Micah Parsons. They decided to go around Micah and extend Jake Ferguson, their tight end. He had a 4-year deal worth $52 million. And the Broncos extended Courtland Sutton. So we weren't quite sure if this was going to happen or not. And it's honestly a pretty good deal, at least on the surface. I haven't jumped into all the particulars and everything else, but it's a 4-year extension worth $92 million. So congratulations to Mr. Cortland Sutton as the Broncos, continue to have faith in him and give him or give Bo Nix some consistency with the veteran presence there in the wide receiver room. So yeah, just those few ones real quick as I'm kind of flipping through. We already talked about the we already talked about Justin Fields. The Bengals. The Bengals signed Henderson, and he's going to be reporting. No, they didn't sign him. Hendrickson's just reporting to camp, but they signed
Stewart.
Stewart. Yes, they signed Stewart, but Hendrickson's did say that he's reporting to camp, so he should be there. He was either there today or coming in tomorrow. So, a little bit of a sigh of relief for Cincinnati. So getting their all-pro pass rusher into the building. So kind of quick little news notes and updates from what's going on here the past couple days.
Fair enough. All righty. Before we jump in here, a couple of comments. We got Binkin saying, my guys, let's go. Sup, fellas. And the game is on Thursday. Raptor,
how exciting.
Yeah. Raptor saying, what do you guys think about Puka in fantasy? The good news is, Raptor, we are going to talk about Puka tonight as we go through the top 20. And if you guys have some comments along the way, go ahead and chime in and we can rock and roll through that as well. But let's go ahead and start getting into the top 20 ADP for wide receivers and start breaking this down. First up tonight, we're going to talk about Rashee Rice. And Rashee Rice last year, 24 receptions on 29 targets, 288 yards, 2 touchdowns. Thoughts on Rashee Rice?
So he was the number 1 receiver in fantasy football through 3 weeks last year before he went down with his knee injury, and then recovering from that. And then, as we talked about last week, we had some settlement and some progress in his off the field issues, but we're still waiting for the league to come down. We were talking about this. We feel a safe assumption is 4 games. I think that's in large part kind of where the fantasy community is in thinking that that'll be it as far as time missed is 4 games, but we don't know that for sure. So the question is, at wide receiver 20, is this the right spot to be taking Rashee Rice? And last week I was kind of thinking, yeah. And I think this week I might be thinking no. Like, I think I've changed my mind here in this 7-day period between shows. I think the knee injury worries me a little bit more than the off the field issue does, right? Obviously missing 4 games is missing 4 games, but by the time he comes back, he will be 1 full year removed from the knee injury, right? At 4 games. Happened in week 4 if he sits out 4 games. So we will say 1 complete calendar year removed from the initial injury. And I think if he was completely healthy, I think we'd be talking about this. Or not completely healthy. I think if he wasn't being suspended, we'd still be talking about this, right? Like, how's this knee going to hold up? I think specifically with Kansas City, because they're not overly reliant on any one option, they're going to spread the ball around as they have the past couple years, right? You had Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown's back, Travis Kelce's coming in there. Like, so you do have plenty of different options as pass catchers. So yes, they want Rice in the building because him and Mahomes did have a nice connection when he was there. He kind of took over some of that intermediate stuff that we were so used to seeing it all go to Travis Kelce, and Rashee Rice kind of stepped in, right, and found the cushion underneath. So the question is his explosiveness, right? Can he cut on this knee to get into those open windows for Mahomes to find him? And I think eventually he will get there. but being a year removed and not being able to be with the team for the first 4 weeks of the season after camp, and then getting back into game shape and everything else, I think you are 7 weeks into the season before you kind of have a real idea of what Rice could be for the remainder of the season. And to draft him at 20 or the 20th wide receiver, I think is a bit rich for me. It's possible he does finish this high if he's able to find himself in the end zone quite a bit. But realistically, guys, I think he might be just outside the top 24, kind of looking in there, just with everything that's going on this season. So there's the ability, right, to set him on your roster and just kind of set him off to the side if you feel comfortable with that, especially if you go, wide receiver heavy at the beginning, right? If you're doing a hero running back or a zero RB type approach, right? You hit receiver in the first 2 rounds, and then you're coming back up, pick 42. So I mean, you're still having to get him in the 4th, right? So you have your 1 running back, and then Rice is your 3rd receiver, maybe, but then you have to cushion that behind Rice. So you are going to be really wide receiver heavy at the top of your draft to be able to make that work and absorb essentially 4 to 6 weeks of not playing, and then hoping he just jumps right back in the swing of things. So I think I'm a little more hesitant now that I'm getting even closer to draft season and really looking at this than what I was last week.
Yeah. So here's what I think you have to. I echo with what you're saying there, Kevin, and I think what is going to be the problem for a lot of people is this is a mid-3rd round pick, right? He's going 42nd overall, so middle of the 3rd round. That you have that's high capital.
That would be the 4th.
36 is through 3 rounds. 42 is mid-4th.
Sorry, you're right. Middle of the 4th round. So still, the point remains, you're still spending high capital, right? Like your first 4 picks on a guy that you maybe get 10 weeks out of. Now, those 10 weeks could be astronomical, right? And could push you to a championship level, right? But to get to being in the championship, you're going to have to be able to suffer through, not having your 4th round pick through 7 games. So I think there is a path, right? The path is you can take Rashee Rice if you have more than 4 picks in the first 4 rounds, right? I think that's a way that you can absorb a Rashee Rice. The other path is if your league's playoffs allow essentially everyone to get in, go ahead, take Rashee Rice because I think you'll get him strong at the end of the year and you'll be able to absorb that. So I think you really have to be smart about what your league is when it comes to drafting Rashee Rice. Otherwise, if you don't have more than 4 picks in the first 4 rounds and you do need to finish in the upper 25% to make it into the playoffs, I don't think Rashee Rice is for you. But I think if you meet certain criteria, sure. Because I do think that Rashee Rice is going to be valuable in the back half of the season, more so than you'll just have to absorb the fact that you're probably not going to have him for the first 4 games of the year.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with the issues at hand, right? That certainly could lead to him missing some time. However, I do think some of that is also baked into the the ADP and where he's currently coming off the board, right? This is one of those I think you're probably looking about where you're going to get him, right? The overall season finish, right? Even if he misses a handful of games, I think there's still a chance that we can see him get up into that back end wide receiver 2 territory. Looking at some other guys and wide receivers going around him, I'd rather have Rashee Rice than Xavier Worthy, right? Like I'd rather have the back half of games with Rashee Rice than have to deal with the entire season long of Xavier Worthy type of thing, right? Teammates, same team, all of that. When those two are on the field together, I don't think that Xavier Worthy comes close to having that similar type of production that Rashee Rice is going to have. Does the coming back from the knee injury worry me a little bit? Yes, there is some of that risk kind of baked in there. Same thing with the potential suspension looming there. That does kind of worry me a little bit there as well. But this is a guy that, if that suspension wasn't looming, this is a guy that would likely be a top 10 wide receiver come off the board. And so I do think that there is some value there and the upside is there. But this is a more than a little bit of risk baked in here. I do wish that I see this risk probably. I'd feel far more comfortable if I was taking about 5 spots later in an ADP. We're down there, wide receiver 25. But one of those, if he falls a little bit, slips a little bit into the 5th round, sure, I don't have a problem taking him there. But this is one of those that this is a risky pick, and I think you ultimately kind of get what you're drafting here, which is right around wide receiver 20 finish. Any other thoughts on Rashee Rice? All righty, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Mike Evans. And Mike Evans last year, 74 receptions, 110 targets, 1,004 yards, 11 touchdown. Thoughts on Mike Evans?
Yes, please. I give me some Mike Evans. I don't care if he's 31 and a little bit longer in the tooth as far as wide receivers are concerned. I don't think that his role in the Tampa Bay offense is going to change all that much. And one thing about Mike Evans that is so great, you feel like it's automatic for 8 touchdowns and 1,000 yards. Sometimes you get more touchdowns, sometimes you get less, but you take that 1,000 yards to the bank. And yes, please. Like, I have no problem putting Mike Evans on my team, whether it's a wide receiver 2 with a high floor, or again, if depending on how I'm, constructing my roster, if he's my flex, if he's my 3rd wide receiver, and that's just kind of how it falls to me, I absolutely love it. So I'm all in on Mike Evans. I think this very well could be his swan song. But I think if it is, we will see much the same as we saw almost in week 17 of last year, right? Where they force feed him the ball to make sure that he gets to 1,000 yards. So maybe he has a slower start, but then you see him absolutely come on the back half of the year because Baker's going to take care of his guy. And with Chris Godwin, not quite sure how his recovery is coming. Yes, they have Mbuka who's coming back. Yes, they have Johnson who's kind of emerging a little bit, but Mike Evans will absolutely get his. He's still amazing at high pointing the football. And when you can high point the football in the end zone, that's 6 points, baby. And Mike Evans good for that.
Don't overthink it. If you're sitting in the 4th round, really, if you're sitting at the end of the 3rd round and you see Mike Evans sitting there, go ahead, hit draft, move on, count your 1,000-yard season.
Right. Yeah, I really don't have much to add there. This is a guy that, when it comes to fantasy, there's few things out there that are kind of more assured than Mike Evans getting 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns. So I really like where he's coming off the board, and to kind of echo Kevin's sentiments is if I can put him in there as my wide receiver 3, go ahead and hit draft and move on. And I really don't even mind taking him as a wide receiver 2 and a lot of that. Now Mike Evans will likely be a little bit more boom bust, a little bit more spike weeks in there than not, but I still like where that leans and where that looks into. Any other thoughts into Mike Evans? Alrighty, let's go ahead and head on over to Terry McLaurin. And Terry McLaurin last year, 82 receptions, 117 targets, 1,096 yards, 13 touchdowns. Thoughts on Terry McLaurin?
I'm a little worried about McLaurin, right? I shouldn't say off the field. The contract dispute with him wanting to get paid. Is there a little bit of a slow start for Terry McLaurin? Now, Jaden Daniels appeared to be the real deal in his rookie season. So if you're a real believer in Jaden Daniels, it doesn't matter. As soon as McLaurin steps on the field, they're going to find ways to get him open. My concern is when you start missing time in camp, it seems like soft tissue injuries are a little bit more apt to happen. And I have never been the world's greatest Terry McLaurin fan, right? Like he's not the hill I planted my flag on. I think I would. I think that if I was putting in position to draft Terry McLaurin or Mike Evans, I would be leaning Mike Evans because I would like a little bit more safety. Maybe McLaurin maybe offers a little bit more upside, right? If he can do what he does last year, he's a little bit more active in the offense just because it's a skinnier tree than maybe what Tampa Bay has to offer. But I'm willing to be wrong on this one, as Derek has kind of said throughout some of these rankings. McLaurin's one of those guys I'm willing to be wrong on. It just does not sit well with me having to roll him in my lineup week in and week out.
So really, we look at what he had last year, and it's 82 catches, as Derek said, 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns. Now that was good enough to separate himself from when you look at what Mike Evans finished was wide receiver 9,000 yards, 11 touchdowns. So we're essentially talking about one decent game, 1,004 yards versus 1,098 yards, 13 touchdowns to 11 touchdowns. Which do you think is more likely to be replicated? Mike Evans, 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns, or Terry McLaurin's almost 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns? I would lean Mike Evans, 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. I think that's more likely to be replicated. But Terry McLaurin finally has a quarterback, and he hasn't had a quarterback yet in his career, and he's finally got one, and it paid dividends. I think I'm at this point with where he's going in the fourth round. Like I said, like if I'm in the fourth round and Mike Evans is staring at me, I'm going to take Mike Evans. So those two guys are the two that I'm kind of, basing it off of. I lean Evans over McLaurin because it just feels safer to me, because I think more likely Evans is going to replicate what he's done literally his entire career versus Terry McLaurin's 1 year where he finally got a quarterback, right? It can lightning strike twice versus a career worth of consistency.
So, I mean, certainly some good points there, right? The one thing that I would say is, right, Terry McLaurin has been very consistent throughout his career, being around 80 receptions and between 1,000 and 1,100 yards each of the seasons, right? Like that's through the last, 5 seasons, it's been around about 1,100 yards, right? 1,000 to 1,100 yards, all right there, averaging out about 80 receptions. The big difference is the touchdowns to it. Yeah, some of that could be the fact that the Commanders came through and were a double-digit win team and were putting up points left, right, and crazy. Whereas before that, there's a reason they were picking number 2 overall. There was a reason they were constantly picking with high draft capital in several of these rounds, and they were looking for quarterbacks throughout that. They certainly seem to have one. I don't know that the regression for Terry McLaurin is as significant as some out there would lead to believe. I still think that this is a guy at the end of the season we're going to see put up around 80 receptions, 1,100 yards. I do think we see some regression in touchdowns, but I think we probably regress down to about 8 or 9 touchdowns, which still going to put him at the top 15 to a fringe wide receiver 1 type of territory. Not necessarily the top 5 or top 6 wide receiver like we saw last year. So I do think there is some regression, but even with where he's coming off the board, I do think that there is some value baked into that, because if you can take a guy at the 18th wide receiver at the end of the 30s, at the beginning of the third round and get production like a guy that you would have had to take about 6 wide receivers earlier and about a round earlier. I do think that there's some value baked into that, and I'm okay with where he's coming off the board at this point. The things that do concern me, though, are exactly what Kevin echoed, is that the contract dispute, right? We haven't seen great production come through on guys that do hold-ins or holdouts, and the fact that we're already dealing with an ankle issue into camp as well. Those are things that have a tendency to kind of stick around. And so this is one of those that before I hit draft, I am really keeping an eye on what the contract looks like, as well as the injury report looks like. And if either of those things have not made progress, I am going to be fading Terry McLaurin. If those have turned around, I think Terry McLaurin's some value here at this draft pick. Any other thoughts on Terry McLaurin? All right. Let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Davante Adams. And Davante Adams last year, 85 receptions, 141 targets, 1,063 yards, 8 touchdowns. Thoughts on Davante Adams?
We can talk about Davante Adams, but we have to go back and talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. after this.
Okay. We can do that too.
I think if Matt Stafford's able to stay healthy, I think him and Adams are going to like playing with each other a lot. Stafford's arm talent is probably back of where Aaron Rodgers was a couple years ago. And Davante Adams finds ways to get open. Like, I think he will succeed in Sean McVay's system. Like, they'll find ways to get him open. I think it's a really interesting combination with him and Puka. Running in that offense as the X and Y mainly. But I'm okay with Adams here. I think this is a guy who has I think he's a really safe wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside by the time it's all said and done with. So, have fun with this one. I think we'll see touchdowns out of Adams. I think the yardage will be there. So you might, when it's all said and done with, you might really see some value here, where instead of taking him at wide receiver 16, 17, maybe he ends up squeaking inside the top 12 and ends up being wide receiver 10 or 11. So there's some perceived upside here with Adams that I'm absolutely willing to gamble on here at kind of that back end of the 3rd round as my second wide receiver.
Yeah, so I think, like, when you're a defense and you have to consider, okay, we're going to try to slow down this Los Angeles offense. Let's try to slow down the run. Well, if we try to slow down Kyron Williams, we're going to open and expose ourselves to Puka Nacua, Davante Adams being open. Okay, well, let's make sure Puka Nacua doesn't hurt us. So now we're going to try to slow down the run and make sure that Puka Nacua doesn't hurt us. That benefits Davante Adams, right? Or they say, hey, we're gonna try to make sure that Davante Adams doesn't hurt us, so we're gonna roll the safety over that way, and hope that one of these guys doesn't end up beating us. I think what's great about where the Rams are is that, one, Davante Adams is healthy, which they couldn't say about their top 2 receivers last year, right? Puka missed time, Cooper Kupp missed time, and those dudes still put together respectable seasons, right? Like, the touchdowns were down, the yardage was up for Puka, but they missed significant time. So I think Davante Adams is a better pass catcher than Cooper Kupp. I'm not going to say he's a better wide receiver, because I think there are things that Cooper Kupp does that are really great. I think he's a better pass catcher, right? So better target for Matt Stafford. I like him better opposite of Puka Nacua. I think that they can play off of each other well. They don't have to line up on the same side of the field in order to get open for each other. So I think that benefits Davante Adams. I agree with you, Kevin. I think you're going to get a better return on investment here. What's tough is that he's going in the 3rd round. So as you're stacking out your draft, right, is Davante Adams going to be your first wide receiver? Like, that's a little bit of a tough pill, I think, that you might want to swallow. Like, I think that's going to be difficult as a third round. That Davante Adams is your first guy if you're picking late in the third. So this all comes down to, roster construct in the first 2 rounds. Is Davante Adams the guy that you want as he sits there in the third and you're drafting? I think if he makes it past the third round and he's still there, go ahead. Be on your way and draft him in the fourth. I think you just have to be careful with what your roster construct is in your first 2 picks before drafting Davante Adams here. But I do think he has a great year, and I think he meets or exceeds this wide receiver 16 ranking.
It certainly has the potential to, right? Like, this is a guy that I think we see a very similar production year end as to what we saw last year, right? Somewhere in that 80 to 90 receptions, probably just under 1,100 yards, and I think we probably see 6 to 8 touchdowns, right? So that's one of the things that that I think certainly does have some value here, and a very, very solid wide receiver too. On this one, I don't know that I necessarily want him as my wide receiver 1. Yes, he does provide some of that wide receiver 1 upside, and there's a potential that he can kind of squeak in there to the very back end of wide receiver 1. But I think this is a guy that when we look up to the end of the season, he'll be kind of firmly in between wide receiver 14 and 16 in all intents and purposes. So I think this is kind of one that you're drafting what you get, but I think you're getting a very solid wide receiver too when it's all said and done. And I certainly don't mind putting Davante Adams on my roster, unless of course I went out and spent up and took Puka Nacua with my first pick. I'm not going to stack it that way, but I do think that there's some potential value, although be it potentially small value. I think where the nice thing about Davante Adams and the way that you can put him on and construct a roster around that is you've got a very solid, reliable week in, week out wide receiver 2 for you that will get you around that double digit points week in, week out. So I like it. Just also tempering expectations just a little bit around the potential upside. Any other thoughts on Davante Adams?
No, I'm trying to see what that stack would look like. If you're grabbing Adams as your first receiver, figure you're going one of the top 3 backs at like the 5th overall pick, right? So Bijan, Barkley, or Gibbs at 5. And then you're following that up with like a Josh Jacobs or Chase Brown, maybe
a Bucky Irving,
something like that, maybe, right?
You could really go crazy and go Trey McBride,
yeah,
or Josh Allen.
On that short turnaround, you're grabbing Adams. Like the numbers are close to adding up there. That's interesting.
It is interesting.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I hate that necessarily, but I don't know that I love it either. Like, I feel like I'm going to be really scratching the bowl here for a lot of number 2 wide receivers, and I need someone's number 1 to go down.
I think the only way you can get Davante Adams in the third is that you take CeeDee Lamb in the first, right? Like, I think that's the way you have to do it. It's CeeDee Lamb or or Puka, which is kind of canceling each other out. I don't know that I'd necessarily like to have Puka and Davante, but with where they're kind of landing, a Christian McCaffrey isn't a bad option there. If you're picking late in the first or in the back half of the first, and then Davante Adams, I think that's a way that you can kind of absorb it without going wide receiver. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting construct for sure.
I think it's tough, but there are a lot of wide receivers in the top 12. Like there's a lot of wide receivers in the top 12.
Right.
I say that there's a lot. There's 7 to the 6 running backs, or to the 5 running backs, excuse me, which is not insignificant, right? But still.
Yeah. Certainly. Any other thoughts here around Devontae? All righty. Let's go ahead and head back over and take a look at Marvin Harrison Jr. And Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, 62 receptions, 116 targets, 885 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Thoughts on Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I'll let Kevin get into this, but I'm going to tell you, like, he had a rough first year. I don't like him again this year, even though he's probably the guy down there, with the exception of is that Trey McBride there? Like, that's really who he has to compete against for targets. I don't like Marvin Harrison Jr. this year. I feel like there's still this rookie luster that's on him, even when we saw what he didn't do last year, that he's going this high. If it came down to Marvin Harrison Jr. or Mike Evans, I'm taking Mike Evans, and I can get him later.
I think Harrison's a guy I'm willing to gamble on this year. Especially if I'm going, if you're going Drake London, right? If you're going, well, maybe not Drake London. Let's think Nico. If you're going Nico Collins, right? You kind of know what you're going to get with Nico. Good enough to be in the top 10, probably not good enough to reach the top 5. But that gives you some flexibility to take a gamble on your number 2 receiver. Number 2, a team that's going to be trailing in a lot of games, right? They did improve, or at least trying to improve the defense in the offseason. We'll see how that works for Arizona. But I think in large part, you expect them to be trailing a lot of games. I think for whatever reason, it just took a little bit longer for Kyler to find Marvin Harrison. And everything that I'm hearing or have read out of Arizona's camp has been that Harrison has put in a boatload of work. Him and Kyler both trying to find each other on the field and everything else. So I am choosing to believe that through a whole offseason and those two guys hanging out, whether they're playing Call of Duty, had to get that little shot in, or just running routes together, that we will see this sophomore lift out of Marvin Harrison. So I'm willing to take a flyer on him at the very back end of kind of almost at the end of the 3rd round. I'm willing to do that. I think really I'm willing to do that because I think I like how it shakes out the running backs for me as it's kind of coming back around maybe. But overall, I do expect Harrison to provide solid wide receiver 2 numbers. And I think he's so dynamic in what we did see last year just in snippets. I don't think it'd be any surprise for people if we see him inside the top 10. Like, he does have that skill set. So I'm choosing to buy it. I was out on him as a rookie as well. I didn't like where he was going. I am going to buy it this sophomore year, though. And I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is potentially, that guy who was knocking on the door and everyone's going to lean one way or the other, right? Either to Alex's point, nah, I'm not doing it, I'm staying away. Or if you're kind of sitting in the camp that I am, because I like him over JSN, who's going, a couple spots ahead of him. I like him and the upside over even like a Tyreek Hill, right? I think Tyreek's hit his peak, right? We are only going to see regression from here. So I'm on board with this. I like Harrison. So not in every league, but there's going to be a good amount of leagues where, I'm going to take a shot on him, see what I can do to build around it.
Alex, any other thoughts on Marvin Harrison Jr.?
No. I respect Kevin's opinion, and you should probably listen to Kevin more than you listen to me. But I'm not buying Harrison Jr. this year.
Yeah, this is definitely a guy that people are split on when it comes to thoughts in the in that realm, right? The fact that a lot of folks are questioning, how Arizona's utilizing him and what that looks like, and will that role expand? Ultimately, it wouldn't surprise me to see Marvin Harrison Jr. still be the second targeted guy in Arizona, right? Wouldn't surprise me if Trey McBride ultimately leads the Cardinals in targets again and is their is the guy that Kyler looks to, because that is certainly the chemistry seems to be there. That being said, though, this is a guy that still managed to find the end zone, and even as much as Kyler looked to Trey McBride throughout the season, Marvin Harrison Jr. was the guy that ended up with 8 touchdowns versus Trey McBride's 2 touchdowns. So there is something there that he certainly does get the looks and all of that when it gets down into the red zone. I do think that we see a little bit of a leap when it comes to the yardage. I think this is a guy that does go over about 1,000 yards. I do think this is one that we probably see seven-ish touchdowns on it, and probably around about that 80 reception mark. So this is a guy that I feel that you can get as a very solid wide receiver 2, potential wide receiver 1 upside. But I'm banking more on the fact that we'll probably see him finish about where he's drafted. And I do think that this is a pretty solid, mid wide receiver 2 this season. Any other thoughts on Marvin Harrison Jr.? All righty. Did have a question coming through here earlier that just wanted to hit up here. Baden was asking, do we pick up Pitts this year also? And I did let them know that we've got that video up on Kyle Pitts on the YouTube channel, and then they go, "Well, without leaving the live stream, give us your confidence 1 to 10. 1 being 2020 Frank Gore or 2022 Frank Gore, and 10 being 2013 OBJ. What is your confidence level, Kyle Pitts, this year using that scale?"
2.3.
Okay, Alex.
I don't remember what I said in that video.
Maybe mine's a little bit higher. I'll go with 3, only because you're getting him outside the top 12. Like, so he's
I think where he's
streamable,
going
drop,
is
pick him up, do whatever. But if I'm going into the season with him as my number 1, I drafted something incorrectly.
Correct. Yeah. Alex, any other thoughts there?
Yeah, I think he's where he's going, he's intriguing, but again, I think he's probably not, your start every week tight end. He shouldn't be.
No, I think that's probably a good way to put that. On that scale there, I'd say it's probably about a 4 or 5 for me. I'm a little bit more bullish just because of the fact that I don't have to really spend any draft capital to put Kyle Pitts on my roster. And at that point, it's easy to move on from. But I think that there is right from the athleticism point of view, there's that potential for some pop. So probably about a 5 on the confidence scale there. Any other thoughts on this one?
Nah.
All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over and take a look at Jackson Smith-Njigba. And Jackson Smith-Njigba last year, 100 receptions, 137 targets, 1,130 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Thoughts on JSN?
I think I'm selling JSN this year. There's not, Cooper Kupp's there, so maybe he stays healthy, maybe he doesn't, but it's the Seattle offense in general. Like, this is going back to a ground and pound type offense. They want to be able to run the football consistently, and as high as I am on Kenneth Walker, I think that's where they feed into. Now, the good news, if you're a Sam Darnold believer, right? Like, he's on kind of a prove it deal here. So, okay, he did it with Minnesota. Can he do the same thing here? Maybe. But ultimately, the way that Seattle's offense is structured, I think you see JSN was somewhere in the neighborhood of 85 to 88 catches this year. So quite, a little bit of a decrease. Touchdowns, we'll call it 6. Yardage, we'll say 1,100. Like, again, I'd rather take Devontae Adams. I'd rather take Marvin Harrison. I'd rather take Mike Evans. Like, him or Terry. Like, this season, would I take Terry? I don't. I about choked on those words. Like, yeah, it's like everyone has those words. Like, I don't know if I'd take Terry over him or not. I just don't love where it's going. I just don't. Like, I think I would rather take a couple guys behind him. I don't think Seattle's going to be throwing the ball enough for him to be kind of a standout number one option. And I think where Marvin Harrison is a standout number one wide receiver, whether you think McBride's going to see more targets or not, standout number one wide receiver. Same thing with McLaurin. I think I'd rather leave a couple of those options. So I'm fading JSN this year.
Sick. I don't have to worry about you taking him. I like JSN this year. I am a Sam Darnold believer. I like him on a prove it deal. And I think that JSN's kind of the show in town. I think Cooper Kupp is there to keep the defenses honest. Kenneth Walker is there. It's going to keep defenses honest. It's going to bring a safety down. I think JSN benefits from all of that. So Sam Darnold has played enough football in this league to understand how to get the ball to his guy. He did it last year with Justin Jefferson. I think I like JSN this year, so I'm fine taking him here. Kevin, I thought what was interesting was how you pointed out that, there are guys after him that you like, but there aren't too many guys in the next, where we're about to talk about that I'm as bullish on as I think a lot of, these rankings are. So like, I'm okay with JSN with this because I think I'd rather have JSN ahead of T. Higgins or Garrett Wilson. Like I just feel like it's an easier, he's the number one, right? He's not cannibalized. He's not being cannibalized by somebody else who's being picked higher on this list. And he's got a quarterback that can feed him. So like, I like JSN this year.
Yeah, this is one for me that it's a little bit tough. I do like that we did see the breakout last year. I'm not necessarily a fan that we're going to see a coaching regime change and a quarterback regime change all in one right after the breakout happened. That being said, right in the he was hyper efficient last year, which certainly does help. But at the same time, right, the Jackson Smith and Njigba is not necessarily the guy that's going to have that breakaway burst speed that's going to, break one and take one to the house, right? Like, this is a guy that's going to likely kind of get this done in a dink and dunk type of scenario. And I don't know that we're going to see a lot of that out of Seattle this year. I think that this is right. Kubiak's in town as the offensive coordinator. This is going to be far more the run zone type of scheme that we see here. And I do think that ultimately is going to eat into JSN's production there. That being said, I do think that we do still see some potential upside there. I think this is a guy that we're probably going to see closer to about 80 receptions, closer to about 1,000 yards and a handful of touchdowns. So this is a guy that I think could live up to his draft capital that he's being taken around. However, at the same time, this is a guy that's not going to surprise me if we see him finish more towards wide receiver 20 to 24 range than wide receiver 12 through 15 range. So this one's a little bit more risky for me. And this is a guy that, to use my patented phrase there, that I'm willing to be wrong on. I'm willing to be wrong on JSN this year. Because I do think that we're going to see a little bit of a drop off. Any other thoughts on Jackson Smith and Njigba? All righty. Let's go ahead and take a look into T. Higgins. And T. Higgins last year, 73 receptions, 109 targets, 911 yards, 10 touchdown. Thoughts on T. Higgins?
I like the idea of T. Higgins. I don't like the frustration of T. Higgins. I don't
That's
know
a-
how else to put that.
That's a
right?
great
Like,
way to put it. That is a
I like
fantastic
the
way to put
idea
it.
of T. Higgins. I expect the Cincinnati Bengals to lead the league in passing attempts. So let's start there. I think no one is going to throw the ball more than Joe Burrow. How many games am I going to get out of T. Higgins? If he only misses 2, I'm in. If he's missing more than 2, then I probably need to pivot a little bit. And he has missed games for some really weird reasons, right, wrong, or indifferent. We thought that he would have a really big year last year because it was a contract year, and he had flashes. But part of what propelled T. Higgins was week 17. It was championship week, right? Against the Denver Broncos. They had Chase fairly covered, but Higgins went 11 catches, 131 yards, and 3 tutties, like wide receiver number 1 in championship week. People do remember that. So I don't know, guys. I'm a little torn. I like the offense. I like the fact that we know that they're going to sling the rock. I am concerned about his availability, and that ultimately will probably make me fade T. Higgins a little bit. I'd still take him over JSN because I'd rather have the number 2 on the team that throws the ball the most than the number 1 on a team that arguably will throw the ball the least. I think them and the Raiders are going to fight that out this year.
Yes, I think what you said, Kevin, is like hits the nail on the head. I think the concept of T. Higgins is really, really attractive. I think the actuality of T. Higgins is really, really frustrating because you're gonna have just bonkers yo-yos. Like it's just a matter of what our defense is going to give to Joe Burrow, because Joe Burrow is going to find it, right? If the defense is going to give T. Higgins to Joe Burrow is going to find him. But like you have to go through the yo-yo that is T. Higgins. If you're looking for consistency, it is not T. Higgins, because you're going to see a wide receiver 41 week and then turn it around and it's going to be wide receiver 5 and then wide receiver 27 and the very next week wide receiver 8. That was a 4-week stretch for him last year, and then he missed 3 games. So like that's the challenge with T. Higgins is he going to have an up week? Is he going to have a down week? Is he going to play at all? Right? He's missed 10 games over the last 2 years. That's not ideal. I think I would be risk averse. So if I'm taking a risk averse mentality, which I tend to take a risk averse mentality when I'm drafting, I'm not going to deal with T. Higgins, right? Like I think there is risk there. There's high reward, but I think you have to be able to balance that out. And I'm not sure how you balance it out with, a pick there in the top of the 3rd round. Like that feels difficult. It feels difficult to have to try and balance out a 3rd round pick. And I just don't, you're going to have to strike gold later. And while I all think we know, who our diamonds in the rough are, is it going to be enough to overcome the fact that your 3rd round pick that you have to play, right? A 3rd round pick you're playing every week if they're healthy. Can you absorb a wide receiver 60 output from him, when it doesn't work?
Yeah, I mean, certainly some good points there. This is an interesting one, right? Because I do think that when we look up at the end of the day, we're going to see T. Higgins somewhere between 70 and 80 receptions and somewhere around about 1,000 yards, and in an offense where they're going to likely be throwing the ball to put the ball in the end zone. I still think that you can see probably 8 to 10 touchdowns, right? So like everything's kind of baked in there for that wide receiver 2 type of finish. Again, this is I do like what Kevin said there, that Cincinnati is going to be passing the ball a ton, and not going to surprise me if we see Cincinnati in several of those shootout type of performances that we saw towards or last year, right, where it's lots of points being scored. Cincinnati's got to be moving the ball and and mostly moving the ball through the air. So yeah, it is one of those that I do think T. Higgins provides some pretty good stability here, right? Like even in an off season, even in a shortened season, T. Higgins is still going to average 6 to 7 targets a game out there, which for wide receiver 2, that's pretty good. There's a lot of wide receiver 1s that you're wishing for that kind of week in, week out performances and type of target share. So I do think that there is some of that there. And with this, I really don't have a problem taking T. Higgins where he's coming off the board. And I think that you could do some really kind of interesting strategy there and some draft strategies, right? If you're going a little bit of a later RB type of approach, going out and taking taking like a Drake London or a Brian Thomas Jr. and then following that up with a T. Higgins, right? Like that could be a very interesting draft strategy and a fun way to start off your draft. So I really don't have a problem with T. Higgins where he's coming off the board. I think that this is one that when we look up the end of the season, we're going to see him ultimately return value somewhere between wide receiver 13 and 16. So I think he's kind of right in that range. Any other thoughts on T. Higgins? All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Garrett Wilson. And last year, Garrett Wilson, 101 receptions, 154 targets, 1,104 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Thoughts on Garrett Wilson?
So, Justin Fields' best season statistically came when he was in Chicago and had a DJ Moore to consistently throw the ball to. DJ Moore also had his best season. I don't know about best. Let me walk that back. Had a very strong fantasy output. I think he was top 10 that year. So I think Fields can focus in on one guy. Right, wrong, and different. The Jets don't have a whole lot more, right? They have Breece Hall. They have their new tight end Mason, who's there. But I think Garrett Wilson, who signed a contract, I don't know why people sign a contract extension with the Jets. I just don't know why you do it. But apparently,
because they're offering you $100 million.
You can get $100 million if you just wait it out 2 years. And I understand maybe
Sure,
you want the security of it, but good Lord, by the time the state takes 55% of your income, it's not. You're better off waiting.
I don't know. I can't say because I've never had somebody present me with $130 million. I feel like it would be hard to turn down.
I feel like it would be, but I don't know. These guys are competitors. They like to win, and the Jets aren't winning anything anytime soon. That being said, I don't know. There's something about Garrett Wilson that I haven't been able to get away from, right? He has been one of those guys where I do kind of just have my flag in that rock. And I think I just keep leaning on the fact that I can get him as my wide receiver 2, and he's the only show in town. He's the only show in town. Now, I'm not going to go and search him out. So I am going to put that little caveat on there, right? Because if Fields does go down, I think you're toast and you don't want any part of it. But if the cards do fall right and Garrett Wilson's just kind of sitting right there, I don't mind Garrett Wilson in this range that he's going, right? So it's Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins, JSN's kind of right there, all in that area. I don't know. I mean, it's intriguing. It's intriguing. I think this is ultimately about where Wilson's probably going to finish right around wide receiver 13, just outside of wide receiver 1 territory, because he hasn't shown that the touchdowns come into play, right? He does a lot of it off of receptions and yardage. Not a big touchdown guy. So we're going to have to see him kind of break out for, 7, 8, 9 touchdowns for him to get propelled inside the top 10 if everybody stays healthy. And that is probably not going to be the case, right? So buyer beware a little bit. I understand the appeal there, like I was talking about. I could wait until if I'm in a position to draft Garrett Wilson, depending on where I'm at near the turn, maybe I wait, right? If I don't love Garrett Wilson, I'll wait that around and then pick up Marvin Harrison. And the crazy thing is all these guys were they're all damn teammates. Like you guys remember that Ohio State team? That Ohio State team arguably could have competed with the LSU team, right? With Harrison and Jigba and Olave and
That defense was salty.
Wilson, Wilson and Jigba, Harrison and Olave all played together at one point with CJ Stroud at Ohio State. Go Bulldogs. That's what I'm going to say about that. Yeah, what happened to that team? Arguably the greatest playoff football game we've seen.
Yeah,
is what that was. That was arguably the greatest playoff college football game we've seen. Anyway, so you're debating over teammates in this range, right? Is basically what a lot of it is, and kind of their usage and whatnot. So I'm a coin flip on Garrett Wilson. I talked on both sides of my mouth, and I rambled on for 5 minutes longer than I needed to, only to say I don't mind the pick. I think it's about right, but the floor is not as safe for Garrett Wilson in this range as some others.
So I'm not in on Garrett Wilson this year. I don't trust Justin Fields to be able to get him the ball. And I think the problem, what Kevin, what you were saying as a positive, I look at as a negative. He is the only show in town. I mean, you got to stop Garrett Wilson. You got to stop Breece Hall. You've stopped the Jets. Like that's what it boils down to, right? So this defense, this offense isn't exactly scary, right? You stop the run, you stop one passing option, and it doesn't work for me. So I'm out on Garrett Wilson this year. I'd rather have JSN, and I can get him, 4 picks later. I think that's not incredibly discernible, but I would rather have JSN. So I think if I'm looking at Garrett Wilson or JSN, I'm going to take JSN, right? If I'm sitting there in that third round, that's where I'm going. As an aside, and you guys want, you talk about that Ohio State team, Kevin, not to derail the show. Go look at the box score of the 2019 LSU Alabama game and just look at the number of NFL players that had an impact on that game. Just as some fun homework. Go look at that box score and see the names in that game. Derek, back to Garrett Wilson.
Okay. Some good points all around there, right? This is a guy, though, that I do feel like you're drafting him a little bit at the ceiling when it's all said and done, right? Like, that being said, though, I do think that Garrett Wilson also has a floor that's probably right here that you're draft. Like this one seems very much that you're gonna draft what you're gonna get, right? Like which is a guy that's going to be a very solid wide receiver 2 for you, very limited wide receiver 1 upside on that. But this is a guy that's come in and had some, I think putrid would be too nice of a phrasing on some of the quarterback play that he's experienced in a Jets uniform through his first 3 seasons of his NFL career. 2 of those 3 seasons was over 1,100 yards through the air, and the other one put up roughly 1,050 yards, right? Like touchdowns just haven't necessarily been there. But this is one that, again, right? Like I think when we look up to the end of the season, this is a guy that's going to be pushing right around 100 receptions, right? Probably between 90 and 100 receptions, pushing right around 1,100 yards. And I think we see another handful to 6 touchdowns when it's all said and done. So, this very well may be a guy that, right? Like, Alex, as you were saying that, only show in town and really, really may be required to try and stop him. This might be a wide receiver, though, that gets force fed and sees 160, 170 targets. And with that kind of volume, volume speaks. And so I really don't have a problem taking Garrett Wilson, because this might be one of the few wide receivers that sees realistically might see double-digit targets every single week. So that's kind of where I'm at. I really do like Garrett Wilson, where he's coming off the board and the volume play that I see for him. Any other thoughts on Garrett Wilson? All righty. Let's go ahead and take a look at Tyreek Hill. And Tyreek Hill last year, 81 receptions, 123 targets, 959 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Thoughts on Tyreek Hill?
Oofta. What a crapper that was last year. I took him.
Yeah, it was.
Oh man, I took him over CD in a work league last year, and I paid for that. As you know, even with CD having kind of a down year, it was just so bad. So, like I said earlier, I think Tyreek's kind of reached the peak, right? And I know that his mantra, his thing this year is, proving the doubters wrong, that he's not aged out and everything else. But my comment to that is, look at how defenses are playing in the NFL now. So much too high safety, right? They're just not letting teams beat them deep, right? That's solely the goal. We've seen it with the Chiefs, and it's branched out to so many other teams. The Dolphins are one of them, right? You're just playing too high safety. You're banking on your front seven to just stop the run game enough, and waiting for the offense to make a mistake. And it really limits what Tyreek Hill can do, right? If you're dropping back in zone coverage and your safeties are there behind you, it kind of takes away some of that short to intermediate routes where Tyreek was kind of a grab and go guy. The safeties keep him from going over the top. So it's not my favorite play this year. Like, I gambled on that last year when he was going much higher back in the first round, but even here at the 2-3 turn, I'm not loving it. Now, I understand the appeal, right? If I got Jamar Chase and Tyreek Hill comes back to me at the very end of the second round, I understand the appeal of how that looks. And it does give you some leeway to be wrong on Tyreek Hill when you're pairing him with a Jamar Chase. But if you're grabbing one of those top 3 backs in a Bijan, Gibbs, or Barkley, I don't want Tyreek as my number 1 this year. Like, I am looking in some other avenues. I would rather, to Derek's point, take the volume play and lean Garrett Wilson and maybe double tap wide receiver in the 3rd and 4th, right? If you're going that anchor RB route. But Tyreek is my number 1. No, thank you. As my number 2, I am entertaining it, because then I feel like I have all of the upside that's possible, and I have minimized all the potential risk, because I have, arguably the best receiver in fantasy football.
So my downfall last year was across the board in all of my leagues. I thought that the Dolphins offense was going to be the best, and I wanted every piece that I could grab of that offense. I'm talking Tua, Devon Achane, Jonnu Smith, Tyreek Hill. I wanted all. Raheem Mostert. If you go look at the roster that I had last year in the home league, it was basically the Dolphins with a few other guys sprinkled in. I did not have Tyreek Hill in the home league. I had him in another league that I'm in with my high school buddies. I say all that, and it burned me big time, right? Last year, just the offense did not go the way that we all thought it was going to. Tua missing time was obviously not great. I should be ready to pass on Tyreek Hill. But I am ready to get hurt again. So give me Tyreek Hill this year. Let me see if this pony has another great season in him, because holy crap, when he is good, he is good. And if Tua is healthy, it is a difference maker. I mean, this is the first year that he played all 16 games, aside from his rookie year, or all 17 games, the whole season. It's the first time he's played the whole season and finished outside wide receiver 8. His rookie year and his second, no, excuse me. And in 2019, he only played 12 games in Kansas City. He finished wide receiver 22 his rookie year and wide receiver 30 in 2019, where he only played 12 games. Every other year, he has been top 3, top 4, top 5, like overall.
Yeah.
Just do it to me again. Do it to me again. Prove me. I need to see that this is now the new normal versus the exception to the rule. I'm willing to take that. I think it'll probably screw me over big time, but I am ready to be hurt again.
Yeah, this is one of those that time it remains type of thing, right? Is this one of those that we're going to see the flashback and the bounce back to form, or has that cliff fully arrived, right? And so there's a couple of things that you could spin this either way, right? With a lot of citing back to the wrist injury last year, kept production down. Tua being out certainly kept production down. Didn't have a good season overall. And reports coming out that the wrist is back to fully healthy again after some wrist surgery. Tua looking to be fully healthy. The upside is certainly there, right? There's lots of things that you can spin that narrative and look at that and say, hey, this is zoom time again, right? Now, that being said, there is some concern on this one, to the point where this very well could be that we've already seen that cliff arrive and has already passed, right? But I am willing to take a shot on Tyreek with where he's coming off the board, because again, at this point, I can get him as a wide receiver 2 for my roster, and at that point, I don't mind taking that risk, because if I can get him as my wide receiver 2, the wide receiver I took earlier in there. That could absolutely pay dividends and have a huge positional advantage that separates out my roster, right? And at that point, I'm also going to be looking down the road, if I do take Tyreek Hill as my second wide receiver off the board, really trying to bolster that up with potentially like a Mike Evans later on. Take somebody else out there that if he really isn't back to form and we've seen the new normal and the decline has started to set in, that I can play that a little bit different week in, week out, and try to balance that out. But this is one of those that I don't mind him as my wide receiver 2. I also would rather look other options though, as well. Any other thoughts on Tyreek Hill? Alrighty, let's go ahead and head on over and take a look at Ladd McConkey. And Ladd McConkey last year, 82 receptions, 112 targets, 7 touchdowns, 1,149 yards. Thoughts on Ladd McConkey?
So I think he can improve upon this. I know Harbaugh's offense loves their running backs, and now they have Amarian Hampton and Najee Harris down there. But I think that they drafted him a decent running mate in Trey Harris to help keep some pressure off of McConkey. And with Ladd being able to do so much out of the slot, right? He does face some off coverage. Him and Justin Herbert seem to have a really good rapport last year. And like I said, I think they're able to build off of that. So I think, I don't know that we're going to see a massive ceiling, a massive jump from here, right? Like drafting him at wide receiver 11, maybe he can finish as like wide receiver 9. But I do think the floor is super safe here also. Like, I think the worst you're going to get out of this is like wide receiver 14. So, sometimes that's not a bad deal for your number 2 receiver, right? Like, you're able to distinguish exactly where he's going to fall out, and you can take some gambles elsewhere on your roster. I like Ladd. He's a guy that I'm probably going to keep my hands on here in our home league, just because I have a great value on him, because some goofball in our league decided to drop him, so I picked him up off of free agency. But I think with what he can do for this Chargers offense and playing off that play action game and a quick release from Justin Herbert, I see Ladd being able to easily replicate what he did last year. If we get lucky, maybe he falls into the end zone another 1 or 2 times, which would help elevate him up inside that top 10 potentially. But overall, I do feel his floor is really safe in this range for where he's going.
Although it's necessarily fair to call whoever dropped him a goofball last year. The first 5, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, he wasn't exactly blowing the barn doors off everybody, but turned into a really good season. I think Ladd McConkey is great if you go 0 RB, right? I think Ladd McConkey is a great second wide receiver to put on your roster. I think if that's the way you're going to go, like you could potentially go CeeDee Lamb or Puka Nacua and then Ladd McConkey, and like, hey, you got to feel real good about the start of that draft, and hopefully you can make some hay, in the later rounds with some running back help. So I think the rapport that he's got with Justin Herbert, I think that the fact that he, I think this is going to be a run first offense, and he will be able to benefit from that with Najee Harris and Amari Hampton there. I like Ladd McConkey, and I don't hate him here, especially if I'm taking that 0 RB approach. I think I'd be a little tougher as my first wide receiver. I think you have to play some things a little bit differently, but at 19, in the second round, if I've got CeeDee Lamb in my first round and then I go Ladd McConkey for my second pick, feel pretty good.
Fair enough. Ladd McConkey for me is a very, very just kind of solid wide receiver too, right? Like I'm not necessarily buying into the upside that I see a lot of folks talking about, that he's a wide receiver 1, has that kind of upside to it. I think maybe very back end to it. But I feel like the Ladd McConkey is very much a floor play, right? He's a very consistent floor. You're going to get just very solid production in that, around that double digit points for you week in, week out. But I don't necessarily like the fact that I don't think that there's a ton of pop weeks out there for him, and a ton of week winning type of weeks out there. So absolutely love that when it's a wide receiver 2 type of roster construct, and I'm putting him on there as my wide receiver 2. I know I've got a very solid 10, 11, 12 points that I'm going to get week in, week out on this thing. But it does concern me that I don't know that we're going to see many of those pop weeks where we get a 20 plus performance week out of him, and for that and that limited upside, that does concern me if I'm putting him on there as my wide receiver 1. But as a wide receiver 2, I absolutely love that construct, and where he's coming off the board right now, kind of in that middle of the second round, that might be a little bit rich. But if he falls a little bit to even to the beginning of the third, I really like the value there. Any other thoughts on Ladd McConkey? All righty, let's go ahead and take a look at A.J. Brown. And A.J. Brown last year, 67 receptions, 97 targets, 1,079 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Thoughts on A.J. Brown?
I feel like that's pretty consistent for AJ, right? Like you don't want him to miss the time that he missed last year. Sat in week 18 when everything was kind of sealed up for the Eagles, but the missing time in weeks 2 through 4 definitely kind of hurt his ceiling last year. I think this is pretty safe. Like he's right around that fringe wide receiver 1 territory, right? Like you'll see some big weeks and he goes on some heaters where he just puts up ridiculous numbers. And then there's still a couple weeks with Philadelphia where they just kind of forget him, right? Like they just don't script him in as much, and you end up scratching your head going, what the heck? So my biggest problem with AJ Brown is I don't like him as my wide receiver 1. I just don't. Like I think he's an amazing wide receiver 2. but where you have to draft him, I always feel like it's a little too rich for me. Like I'm always looking for a different option besides AJ Brown. Again, the boom weeks are there, right? We saw it in 23, we saw it last year again in 24 down the stretch. Like the boom weeks are there for AJ Brown, but then you have these random weeks. Wide receiver 35, wide receiver 60, wide receiver 36, wide receiver 38, 46, 36 again. Like those are too many wide receiver 3 performances for me to draft a guy in the first round or as my top wide receiver. Like I need more consistency from my top guy than, well, 6 weeks out of the season, he's going to be wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. Like that's not good enough. And so for that reason, I just don't see a whole lot of that changing with Philadelphia's offensive philosophy. So I'm going to be fading AJ Brown.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that, Kevin. I think there's too much inconsistency there for me to have to draft AJ Brown. Whereas I feel like, Labby Conkey, say floor, right? The floor for AJ Brown on any given week is wide receiver 3 or 4 because just how Philadelphia plays offense. So I'm out on AJ Brown, and it's not against the player. It's where the player is going, right? It's everybody else's opinion of the player that I can't take him here, especially if he's my wide receiver 1. So I think it's tough. Where he's going is 18th, so middle of the second round. You're drafting in the middle of the first round, which means you have to take, Puka or Malik Neighbors, and then take an AJ Brown, and that just it doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies that I think I'd like there. I think I need to go for a little bit more solid ground drafting in the middle of the first, middle of the second, than what those two would provide or what AJ Brown would provide me.
Yeah, I'm pretty well out on AJ Brown, right? The Eagles had one of the lowest run pass ratios last year, and I don't think that changes at all this year, right? I do think that they're still going to use Saquon a ton. Jalen Hurts going to do what Jalen Hurts does there as well, and ultimately, I don't know that we're going to see much of a difference this year, especially when it comes to the passing game and the passing volume. Like, not going to surprise me at the end of the year if we look up and Jalen Hurts is at 350 pass attempts, which, when you sprinkle around 350 pass attempts between Saquon and AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and type of thing, right? Like those are 4 pretty astute pass catcher pass catchers in Philadelphia. So I don't like the volume. I don't like the boom bust potential on that. Like, absolutely love the fact that if you've got AJ Brown on your roster as in a best ball, he'll go out there and win you a week and do it a couple of times throughout the season. And then he's going to have other performances that are going to absolutely just, leave you kind of crying in the corner because your wide receiver 1 just gave you 3 points, right? Like, and it really seems to be kind of one or the other with AJ Brown. There's not a whole lot of middle ground in there. It's either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 3 finish. And I'd rather not just deal with that headache on a week in, week out for redraft. So I am pretty firmly out on AJ Brown this season. Any other thoughts on AJ Brown? All righty, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Drake London. And Drake London last year, 100 receptions, 158 targets, 1,271 yards, 9 touchdowns. Thoughts on Drake London?
I want to think that Drake London can replicate what he did last year, right? 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns.
Just throwing the football to him.
And that's the caveat, right? Do you believe in Penix? Do you believe that over Penix three starts, right? Week 16, week 17, week 18. So him and Drake London collectively got stronger together, right? Wide receiver 47 the first week, then 26, then ended it as wide receiver number 1. Wide receiver
In a week
number one
that-
in week 18.
That doesn't matter for fantasy and doesn't matter because everybody in the real league that's playing for something is sitting out.
Right. Wild card implications, right? And the NFC South is kind of a dogfight. There's not a clear team that's just going to bulldoze everybody through. But I mean, they played the Giants and Carolina in weeks 16 and 18. So Washington was really the competition, right? Week 17, Washington hadn't really sat anybody yet. And put up 7 out of 13 for 106 yards. That's not a bad stat line. I mean, do we think we're going to be able to see that consistently is really what the key is. So I think I like London for a best ball more than a redraft this year. And it's the uncertainty of Penix. Now, maybe I'm not thinking about this clearly, right? Maybe I'm thinking about this as too much of, if Penix wins this job, he is going to be the starter come hell or high water, not, well, if Penix really struggles, they're going to throw Kirk Cousins back in, and we know Kirk Cousins knows how to find Drake London. So there is a safer fallback for Drake London than a lot of the wide receivers. It's not like a Tyreek Hill situation where if Tua goes out, everyone forgets what the forward pass is in Miami. So maybe there's a little bit more of a buffer going in there. I like Drake London, the player. I just don't know that I like where his draft stock is this year with all the uncertainty. How are you going to have a quarterback 26, 27, 28 come off the board, but you're thinking you're going to have a top 10 wide receiver? The math is not mathing. So one group of people is going to be right, but both cannot be right in my assessment. You cannot have Penix be mid to late 20s as far as quarterback ranking and Drake London be top 10 in wide receivers. One of those two things is going to be wrong. I'm willing to bet it's on the wide receiver side, not on the quarterback side.
This is, for all of the reasons why I'm out on AJ Brown, it's kind of the same thing here with Drake London. And it's not because Drake London will disappear, but it's just it's unsafe to me. So you're right, Kevin, as a best ball option, sure, Drake London's probably fine. But where Drake London is going, and again, it's not really against the player, it's the circumstance. And I just don't like the circumstances surrounding him. I don't like that. I'm uneasy about the quarterback play, and quite frankly, I think he's being valued a little bit too high because of that. And it just doesn't work for me. As Kevin said, the math doesn't math. So I'm out on London this year in redraft. I think you put yourself in a bit of a predicament if you take him as your wide receiver one. If you take running back in the first round, I think he's a little bit easier to stomach as a wide receiver too. And there's a pathway there that's okay, but
if I can pair him up with a Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah. That's and totally feasible.
That's feasible, right? At 10 and 16 overall. That's within the realm. I don't feel nearly as bad about Drake May at that point. But
yeah. I mean, but he's got to be
going.
He has to fit a very specific set of criteria in order for me to be considering him. A very specific set of criteria has to be met, and I'm not sure that I'm super comfortable being like, okay, if X, Y, and Z happens, then I'm okay with my second round pick. That's not how I want to feel with my second round pick. I don't want to feel like, oh, okay, I've been colored into this box that I need to take this guy now. That's not how I want to, feel going into round 3.
Fair enough. I really like the Drake London call here and the Drake London pick with where he's coming off the board. I do think that this is a lot of floor type of play here. Interestingly enough, right, when talking about the quarterback and where they're going and top top 10 wide receivers and all of that. Right now, CJ Stroud, Trevor Lawrence, Michael Penix, Tua Tagovailoa, and Matthew Stafford are the quarterbacks 19 through 24 coming off the board there. When looking at the wide receiver list, each of those guys has a wide receiver in this range out there, right? Puka Nacua with Matthew Stafford, Nico Collins with CJ Stroud, Brian Thomas with Trevor Lawrence, Drake London with Michael Penix Jr., and Tua with Tyreek that we just talked about. So there's a lot of those wide receivers that have quarterbacks that are going in that same range as Michael Penix with where they're coming off the board. I do think that Drake London is a guy that is going to be an absolute target monster this season. And it's not going to surprise me if we see him with 150 to 160 targets when it's all said and done. So I do think that the volume's there. And if nothing else, he'll get into a top 10 wide receiver finish from a volume play alone. I do think that we may see a bit of a regression this year, right? I think we're probably just south of 1,200 yards, but I think we're still right around 100 receptions and right around about 8 touchdowns. So I do think that we're going to be very similar finish to where he's coming off the board right now. And certainly if doing like you guys were talking about, we're taking a wide receiver in the first round and then following that up immediately with Drake London, that could be super solid from that, right? Because you're getting spike upside with him, but you're also getting what I feel is a very safe floor with a volume based type of performance week in, week out. Any other thoughts on Drake London? Alrighty, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Brian Thomas Jr. And last year, Brian Thomas Jr., 87 receptions, 133 targets, 1,282 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Thoughts on Brian Thomas Jr.?
What are we gonna get out of the second year, right? Like, it's just, what are we gonna get here? It was a good rookie year, obviously coming in wide receiver 4. Like, can he replicate that now that there's film? Can he replicate that? You'd have to think that with the additions that Jacksonville made in the offseason, really with Travis Hunter coming in, how much is he going to play wide receiver? How much is that going to eat into what Brian Thomas does? How much of a, will it be a plus like I've been talking about with some of these other guys? Is Brendan Strange going to take that next step there in the tight end role and become more involved in the passing game? Is ETN going to be the running back that I think?
I think he froze.
Going once. Going twice. Gone. All right. He has all the doubts. I don't have the doubts. I like Brian Thomas where he's going right here. Like, I like the fact that a bit of a discount from where his finish was last year. I think Jacksonville, right? The different coaching tree going in here this season. Are we going to be able to get Trevor Lawrence to finally see kind of that ascension we always thought was possible when he was coming out of Clemson? Got him a really solid running mate, obviously, but make no mistake, Brian Thomas is still the X here. Like, he is still going to be the dominant force. And I like him right here at the turn. I think it's really sexy being able to pair him up with any number of combinations with kind of what you're looking at here. A lot of it, I'm going to be double tapping wide receiver, right? I just like double wide receiver here at the end of the first, beginning of the second. Possibly St. Brown, Nico. You can go Brian Thomas, and then you could follow Brian Thomas up with a Drake London, right? And so then you reach a little bit for Drake London, but you could pair those two up and kind of take the volume from London, the high success explosive rate from Brian Thomas, and you can kind of even those out a little bit. And I think that makes Drake London look a little bit more appealing to me. So I think this is very good value for Brian Thomas. I think in this range out of Nico, Brian Thomas, Drake London, AJ Brown, Lad McConkey, right? Everybody who's kind of going in that second round, Tyreek Hill, right? Well, because Tyreek's going at the back end of the second. Anybody going in the second round for those wide receivers, I think Brian Thomas has the greatest opportunity to finish inside the top 5. So I'm going to select draft, and I'm going to move on and feel pretty good about myself, whether he's my 1 or 2. I can spin it both ways. I can live with him being my 1 if I go running back at the back end of the first. Brian Thomas and Derrick Henry. There's something kind of sexy about that, right? Like you get almost like a thunder and lightning approach between what those guys are doing. So I don't mind it. So I will see a good amount of Brian Thomas. If I'm drafting at the back end, I will see a good amount of Brian Thomas on my roster.
Alex, any you kind of froze there. Any other thoughts on
Yeah, my internet was tired of me waffling on the Brian Thomas debate. It said make a point or stop talking, and it forced me to stop talking. I'm in on Brian Thomas Jr. I think it's a fun little turnaround here. If you go, I mean, obviously, I think Derrick Henry, Brian Thomas, as Kevin suggested, would be really intriguing. I think Tavon Achane, Brian Thomas would be fun. I also think there's a world in which you can get an Amon-Ra St. Brown or Nico Collins and Brian Thomas Jr. and feel all right there. So I'll take BTJ. I think he can back it up from last year. I think the addition of Travis Henry is a positive for him because I'm not sure how much offense he's going to actually play. But I say Travis Hunter. I'm sorry. You looked at me like I don't have anything. But the addition of Travis Hunter, I think, is a positive for him. I think, obviously he has developed some chemistry there with Trevor Lawrence. So I'll take Brian Thomas Jr. there as a wide receiver 1, even I think is okay.
Yeah, I really think that Brian Thomas Jr. is set to zoom this year as well. Right, he came out the gate strong. Certainly had a really good season, even with Mac Jones being the guy throwing the ball down the stretch. Right, he still put up very, very good fantasy numbers and fantasy productions here. I think that this is very much a rinse and repeat type of thing here. And the fact that I can get him with the second round pick just makes it all the more appealing there. Not going to surprise me when I look up at the end of the season and we're right around about 100 receptions, call it 1,200 to 1,300 yards and 8 to 9 touchdowns. Like I think it's wheels up here for Brian Thomas Jr. for a sophomore campaign. And I think that we're in for really good things here. And I do think there's value with this draft pick. Any other thoughts on Brian Thomas Jr.? All right, let's go ahead and head on over to Nico Collins. And last year, Nico Collins, 68 receptions, 99 targets, 1,006 yards, 7 touchdowns. Thoughts on Nico?
I think Nico, right, kind of went through a weird spat or stretch in the middle of last season, went down with an injury. What Texans receiver didn't get injured last year? That's a trivia question that I think most Jeopardy contestants would lose. That being said, when he's playing, CJ Stroud does a good job looking for him. Like he consistently sees 8 to 10 targets a game. And he's not touchdown adverse. Right. So if you're telling me that Nico Collins is going to be healthy, I'm saying awesome. I think this is fair value. I don't see him really creeping inside of the top 5. Like he's just not normally he's not that type of player. They use him for some downfield stuff, but a lot of it is a lot of it's deep ins and deep outs, not necessarily post corners and flies, right? A lot of sideline work or between the hashes. So just a different type of route tree that they use with Nico. Part of it could have been last year as well, with the time that they had Diggs. Obviously Tank Dell was kind of different there when he is healthy, but I don't think we're going to see him this season. Or at least much of him this season either. So going back to it, Nico's, when he's healthy, he's really the only show in town here, much to what we were speaking about earlier. Difference is Nico's shown it, right? Like, and so I'm willing to bank on that you at least return fair value. Again, maybe not a ton of ceiling, but I think Nico has a pretty safe floor for this range, that you're getting pretty much what you're expecting week in and week out.
Yeah, only show in town. Christian Kirk's there now, down in Houston, and I think it doesn't move the needle, but I do think it keeps defenses honest, which is what Nico needs, right? Nico needs defenses to stay honest. I think CJ Stroud, for as great of a rookie year that he had, he did not meet expectations last year. I think there's another step to be taken. I think there's I think that he, another year in this league and understands it. And to your point, Kevin, man, the injury bug just ran rampant through the Houston Texans locker room last year. And it was not kind to that offense. So I like Nico here. I mean, when you're looking at, we're going to get down to these top guys here, and we're talking about, is it not, do I draft Nico or this other wide receiver? Do I like Nico or this running back, or do I like Nico or, at this spot? So Nico at 12, I can live with. I can live with Nico at 12 as my first, if I'm at the back half of the first round, I can live with that and feel like I can set myself up with, again, a Devon Achane or Derrick Henry if I want to go running back right after that, if I'm on the turn, or pair him up with a Brian Thomas Jr. Like, I don't hate that at all.
Right. Nico's another one of those guys that very well could be a volume-based receiver this year, right? Like, not going to surprise me if we look up to the end of the season and Nico's averaging around 10 targets a game, right? And from CJ Stroud, those will be valuable targets there. So this is a guy that I really like where he's going. I think that we can see easily top 5 type of finish at the end of the season. And I think that he'll be able to get there on a volume play. So I really like Nico, really like where he's coming off the board at. And I do think that there's some value baked into this, even with a wide receiver 7 type of draft capital on that, because I'm feeling like this is about as floor as what we're seeing drafted there. Any other thoughts on Nico Collins? All right, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown. And last year, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 115 receptions, 141 targets, 1,263 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Thoughts on Amon-Ra?
Yes, please. All right. I mean, you talk about consistency and being able to play through. He plays a ton out of the slot, which I like because it's just some of that off coverage, but he's a quick twitch, dynamic, does find the end zone, can have some of the big play capability there. But he's a guy that you just root for. Like, I like St. Brown. I think this is fair value back into the first round. Some potential to sneak inside the top 5, maybe top 4. But I mean, anywhere here from, 4 through 8 and you're happy with St. Brown. And I think that's probably what you're going to get. So I like it. You get a fair return on value here. And he's a guy that I have no problem smashing yes on.
Don't overthink it. If Amon-Ra St. Brown is up and you are picking and you're in this range, don't overthink it.
Right. Smash draft, move on. Yeah, at the same time, right, I'll give the counterpoint to that we have a new offensive coordinator, potentially new scheme. What does that look like? All of those types of things. Even with all of that, right? Trying to give the counterpoint on what if type of thing. I still think that this is a guy that's going to be at 110 plus receptions when the season's all said and done. We're going to see over 1,200 yards and double-digit touchdowns. It's a smash draft move on. This is a guy that I don't know that we see him necessarily get up and finish wide receiver number 1 overall, but again, a guy that I see as a pretty easy top 5 type of finish when it's all said and done. Any other thoughts on Amon-Ra? All right, let's go ahead and head on over and take a look at Malik Neighbors. And last year, Malik Neighbors, 109 receptions, 170 targets, 1,204 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Thoughts on Malik Neighbors?
Neighbors showed some goods last year, right? He had a much better season than what I thought he was going to have, especially with Daniel Jones at quarterback. So, Russ is interesting, right? Like we've seen both sides of it. Can he produce a top 5 wide receiver for the Giants? I think they might have to, only because their running game's not so strong. They're going to be in a lot of games, though. That defense is pretty stout in New York, so they're going to be able to hang around a little bit, try and stay balanced. But at the end of the day, I think this might be a little rich for Malik Neighbors for my blood. Like, I think I'd put him down below Brian Thomas and kind of have him fit right in between Brian Thomas and Drake London. But I understand some people really want to jump on this and take it home. So a little rich for my blood, but I understand why people are doing it.
So if you look at the other options in New York when it comes to the wide receiver room and their current projected depth chart, right? You've got Malik Neighbors, you've got Wan'Dale Robinson, you've got Darius Slayton. Wan'Dale Robinson is going wide receiver 171, and Darius Slayton is going wide receiver 198. What does that mean? We all think that the ball is going, if the ball is being thrown, it's going to go to Malik Neighbors, right? Like that's basically what this is telling us, is that we all think that if the ball is being thrown, it's going to Malik Neighbors. Yes, Theo Johnson exists, but the ball's got to go somewhere. So I think he gets hyper targeted. I don't like the fact that Malik Neighbors is basically the only passing option in this offense. But the dude got 170 targets last year. I think that number probably tracks down a little bit because Russ has a tendency to not super hyper focus on guys, right? Like Russ is going to take what the defense gives him. So I'm a little hesitant on that, but 170 targets, like I don't know how you can thumb your nose at that. I'm not super sold on the fact that Malik Neighbors is going to be on a winning football team. Like I don't know that I like any other part of this Giants offense other than Malik Neighbors. So, and just because of the volume alone makes it a very intriguing play to me. So I think I'm in on Malik Neighbors, but only because I expect him to see a ton of footballs thrown his way.
Fair enough. This is a guy that I do think Malik Neighbors has a very good season when it's all said and done. This is a guy that I personally would rather take like an Amon-Ra, St. Brown over Malik Neighbors from a situation, from a, how often I think the team's going to have the chance to put the ball in the end zone and what that looks like. But Malik Neighbors is certainly a big play kind of guy and a home run threat from anywhere on the field. Quarterback play should be a little bit improved. Russ does have a pretty good downfield, deep ball. So certainly a lot of things there. I don't have a problem taking Malik Neighbors in this range. There is maybe one or two guys that I might draft over him in that range. Amon-Ra being one of those guys going a little bit further down the list. But But if you're putting Malik Neighbors on your roster as your first wide receiver, certainly don't have a problem with that. And this is a guy that, again, should warrant a lot of targets and be in that 150-plus target season range this season. So any other thoughts on Malik Neighbors? All righty. Let's go ahead and take a look into Puka Nacua. And last year, Puka Nacua, 79 receptions, 106 targets, 990 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Thoughts on Puka?
I want to like Puka, but at the same time, Puka worries me a little bit. Devonta Adams is going to be a deal down there. And again, not all things can be correct, right? You can't have Puka in the top 5, Devonta Adams in the top 20, and Matt Stafford sitting, just outside of 20 with where he's going drafted. Like I don't believe all those things can happen at the same time. I get it. Stafford's not mobile. He's just doing it with his arm, but I mean, your route tree is skinnier in LA for the Rams, and I get that. But if you're thinking Puka's going to have 1,300 yards, Devonta Adams is going to have 1,100 yards, each one's going to have 8 touchdowns, right? I mean, so I just don't see how all of it happens. So I like the idea of Puka, but I don't like drafting Puka here in this first round. So I will personally fade him. I will let one of you two pick him up if you so choose. I just would rather plant my flag somewhere else than Puka Nacua as, my top 4 wide receiver.
So holistically, as you look at this, you've got, if everything goes according to plan for the first 6 picks, you're looking at your best availables are Puka, Christian McCaffrey, Malik Neighbors, Amon-Ra St. Brown, or Ashton Genty. Those are like the next 5 after, there. So who among those 5 are you taking? Quite honestly, Kevin, I'm with you. Like I would rather have a Christian McCaffrey or a Malik Neighbors, definitely an Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I feel like that's a little bit, 7 to 10 isn't horrible. Or an Ashton Genty, like that is intriguing. So like Puka at 7, I think it is fine, but Devontae Adams is in town. If you think that Matt Stafford is the 20th best quarterback and two wide receivers in the top 20, that doesn't work either. So I don't know that I'm necessarily in on Puka at 7 because there are a couple dudes after, not even necessarily wide receiver, that I think I would rather lean on than Puka.
Yeah, I mean, all good points. I do think that we see Puka have another strong season, right? Like, there's been a lot made of the Breakfast Club out in LA with Matthew Stafford and his wide receivers. Puka certainly is in that club. This is a guy that since he's come into the league has averaged over 9 targets a game throughout his career. Has put up a absolute ton of yardage as well, right? Like last year in the 11 games that he played, we saw him average, 90 yards a game, 90 yards a game there. His rookie season, still averaging 87 yards. So this is a guy that through his first 2 seasons, right? We've seen him come in and average 9 targets a game, 90 yards. The touchdowns necessarily haven't been great, but still manages to get some touchdowns here and there. So, kind of a touchdown every 3rd game. So, looking at that, I do think that this is a guy that when we look up at the end of the season, if he plays all the games, we'll still see him with over 100 receptions. I think you're going to see probably in that 13 to 1,400 yards and 6 touchdowns. So a guy that I really don't have a problem drafting here with this one. And I get that, Devontae Adams is certainly has been a name in the league and all of that, but Devontae Adams is also a guy entering into the latter part of his career, and is currently 32 coming into this season, right? Puka certainly on the younger side of that, 24 going into this season, and certainly tends to be on the ascend, and already has that relationship and that chemistry built with Matthew Stafford. So I'm not really seeing a decreased role for Puka Nacua on this one. I think this is still a deal. When we look up, we're going to still see a very, very solid fantasy performance for him. And I do think that we're going to see maybe not necessarily top 5, but I think we're still going to see absolutely a top 10 performance on him. But it wouldn't surprise me to see him probably finish behind maybe Amon-Ra. Maybe Nico Collins sneaks up in there, but I do think that we're going to see another really good finish. Any other thoughts on Puka? All right, let's go ahead and take a look at CeeDee Lamb. And CeeDee Lamb last year, 101 receptions, 152 targets, 1,194 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Thoughts on Puka Nacua, or on CeeDee Lamb?
Smash yes. Just smash yes. He's 100 plus receptions. The touchdowns are going to be there. I think George Pickens actually takes pressure off of CeeDee Lamb. So you might see a couple more like big pop weeks out of CeeDee in certain areas. I have zero issues drafting him. The Cowboys aren't going to have a run game. Dak is going to have to throw the ball. Like, their defense is in shambles. Who knows what's going on with this Parsons deal? Like, everything screams draft CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. So I'm absolutely on this. Yes, move on.
Yeah, if you're up and CeeDee Lamb, again, where you're at in the middle of this first round, CeeDee Lamb's available. Don't overthink it.
Right. This is a smash draft. Move on. You're not going to be surprised. We look up at the end of the season and we see CeeDee Lamb with 105, 110 receptions, over 1,400 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Like, I think that this is a guy that's going to absolutely just smash this draft capital, and you'll see him be a top 3 wide receiver and vying for wide receiver 1 overall at the end of the season. So, any other thoughts on CeeDee Lamb?
Currently, he's at 3 with Justin Jefferson and his hamstring issue. Would you move him up to 2 in your rankings?
I wouldn't surprise me if he finishes number 1 overall. So yeah,
I'd agree with that. I think he has a legitimate shot of finishing 1 overall.
Right. So yeah, especially if JJ's, those soft tissues and those camp strings just scare the ever living out of me. Like, we've seen that too many times where it's a mild hamstring and it lingers, and then it lingers and it lingers, and then before we know it, it's week 3 of the season, and now the guy's finally back up to form, or now just returning from the injury. So camp strings do scare me. Any other thoughts on CD?
I think he does have a legit shot at being number 1 overall.
All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over and take a look at Justin Jefferson. And Justin Jefferson last year, 103 receptions, 154 targets, 1,533 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Thoughts on Justin Jefferson?
Kind of same deal. You want to keep, if you haven't drafted yet, keep an eye on the news, understand where the soft tissue injury is with this mild hamstring strain that the Vikings are calling it. So definitely keep an eye on that. But again, there's, in my mind, there's only 3 guys who have a legitimate shot at wide receiver 1 overall. And it is Chase, Jefferson, and Lamb. Whether it's volume, whether it's just sheer talent, but their ability to get their guys open. I would be extremely shocked if anybody else crept into that number 1 spot. So another guy, whether you get him second over, I wouldn't draft him first, right? I've seen some places pre-injury where he was going 1 and people were kind of planting their flag. I don't know that I'd go 1 because of this hamstring injury, but if you're wanting to start out with wide receiver, you got to take him 2 or 3 because he's not getting back to you. Like, there's just no chance, regardless of what we hear about this hamstring. So I think because of this injury, I would possibly be leaning CeeDee Lamb here and let someone else gamble with the soft tissue deal. But if the guy in front of me took CeeDee and I was staring down Justin Jefferson, I'd have to do a real hard, long look in the mirror whether I was going Jefferson or one of those running backs to start my roster for this season.
So what scares you more about Justin Jefferson, the hamstring or JJ McCarthy?
Hamstring.
The hamstring.
That's
I
not
think
right.
Jefferson's shown that he can play with subpar quarterbacks, right? Kellen Mond found a way to make
Josh
Justin
Dobbs.
Jefferson and Josh Dobbs, like he was top 24, top 12 even a couple weeks with either one of those guys. So I think that the Vikings understand how to get Justin Jefferson open and that he can communicate well enough to get the football, especially with Addison. If he's going to be down for a couple games because of suspension, like he's going to be fed. They need him healthy. They absolutely need him healthy. Otherwise, it's going to be a really long season for McCarthy with Addison missing time because of his legal issues. If Jefferson has an issue with this or a setback because of this hamstring, it's just kind of one of those things. But Jefferson's just one of those guys that he goes on runs, right? Like in any given quarter, he can have 3, 4, sometimes 5 catches in a quarter. It's crazy, and then he goes quiet a little bit, and then he pops back up, right? And just kind of one of those things. But I like JJ. Scares me a little bit, but I like JJ.
I think it scares me enough that I'd rather go CeeDee Lamb if I'm picking in the third or fourth spot. I think I'd probably go CeeDee Lamb. But all that to say, like, oh, what an embarrassment of riches you have if you're picking at 3 and 4. And quite honestly, if you're picking at 3 and 4, it's probably because you didn't have the best year last year. So go safe. Go safe.
Believe it or not, some leagues just randomize it every year. That's not how our league does it.
That's true. That's true. But go safe. I guess that's my piece of advice here is go with what you think is the safest. And you have to be paying attention because, like, Justin Jefferson has not practiced yet. And granted, we're 2 days in or whatever it is, but he hasn't practiced yet. And they're hoping that he's ready by week 1. That's the message that's out there as we sit and talk now on July 30th here in Central Time Zone. You have to be paying attention to that.
Right. I mean, really the only concern for me is the hamstring that's popped up on the injury report, and just the fact that we've seen those camp strings turn into bigger deals that then bleed into the season, right? So I am keeping a very close eye on that to kind of take a look into that. We do have Kevin O'Connell coming out earlier today and saying that they're not planning on shutting him down, and he should be back sooner than later type of thing. So some optimistic coming from there on that, but that would be the only pause that I would have with Justin Jefferson. Any other thoughts on Justin Jefferson? All right, let's go ahead and head on over and look at Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase last year, 127 receptions, 175 targets, 1,708 yards, and 17 touchdowns. Thoughts on Jamar Chase?
Yes. It's safe. It's yes. Like, he has the ceiling. He has a high floor. Even if we see a little bit of regression in yardage because T. Higgins remains healthy, like, I don't think we see that much of a regression. There's still big play touchdown capabilities. And again, I think the Cincinnati Bengals are probably going to lead the league in pass attempts just by the nature of their offense here this season. So I have zero issues with taking Jamar Chase, not only as the top wide receiver, but as the number 1 overall pick in fantasy this season.
Yeah, so it's really come down to do you want Jamar Chase or do you want, and he settled the debate. It's actually pronounced Bijan, I guess, for what it's worth. Bijan Robinson. I think if you can't go wrong either way. So if you're picking at 1, you obviously have pick of the litter. If you're picking at 2, you get to pick what the person in front of you didn't take. So I don't know that you go wrong with either of those 2 picks. If it's Chase or Robinson, those should likely be the first 2 picks in just about every draft.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's one of those that if Jamar Chase is sitting there, you draft yes and you move, or you smash draft and you move on, right? I do agree with Kevin that I think the Bengals will have some of the highest passing volume of any team in the league this year. I think that they're going to be in a bit of a shootout type of mode, and not going to surprise me if Joe Burrow leads the league in pass attempts when it's all said and done. So again, smash draft, move on. However, before we fully move on, I do have a question for you gentlemen. Bit of a trivia question, if you will. A wide receiver that finished wide receiver one has not finished wide receiver one in the following season, going back several seasons. So my question to you is name the last receiver that finished wide receiver in one season and followed it up with wide receiver one the following season, and you get bonus points if you know the seasons that it happened in.
Antonio Brown and 18 and 19.
It's a good guess. Antonio Brown has finished wide receiver number one overall, however, was not in 2019 or 2018. The last time Antonio Brown finished wide receiver number one overall was all the way back in 2014.
Oh
But
my
it is
goodness,
not.
I'm dating myself. Holy smokes.
But it is not Antonio Brown.
Ooh.
I'm gonna go. The only name that's coming to mind is Randy Moss.
That would be my second guess.
Like, I'm going Randy Moss, and I'm gonna say the 2 years that he was with Tom Brady in New England. So, when was that?
05 and 06.
God dang it! Was it that long ago? Holy crap! So yeah, I'm gonna go Randy Moss. Am I right with Randy Moss?
You are not.
Yeah, great.
You're incorrect with the Randy Moss.
Is it more recent than Antonio Brown in 2014?
It is in between your Randy Moss and your and Antonio Brown.
Right.
Wow.
Okay. Who was really good there in the late? Oh, how about give me oh god, why can't I think of his name?
It's not T.O.
It's not T.O. It was a first ballot Hall of Famer, not T.O.
Who? Oh,
Julio Jones.
Nope. And Julio has not been inducted into the Hall of Fame. This individual has
He is
already.
in my mind. He is in my mind.
Eagles.
Fair
who
enough.
was the Eagles receiver?
It was not
Deshaun Jackson.
No.
It is not Deshaun Jackson. No.
Yeah.
Played on the Lions.
Calvin Johnson.
It is Calvin Johnson. It is Megatron.
Yeah.
Back in 2012 and 2011 was the last time that we saw a wide receiver go back-to-back seasons with wide receiver one overall finish. So I bring that up to then say, can Jamar Chase be that guy that breaks the streak? Certainly has the talent to do so, and certainly is in the situation to do so. Certainly has the quarterback to do it. However, it is unlikely that we see that come to play, and that's probably the only thing that gives me any pause about drafting Jamar Chase there. But again, when I'm on the clock, if Jamar Chase is there, I'm going to smash draft and move on. So, anyway, a little bit of fun there. Any other thoughts on Jamar Chase?
But go back and look at that 2019 LSU Alabama because he played in that game.
Yeah. So, alrighty. Well, that's going to take us down here to the end of it. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners? And if anybody has any burning questions, throw them out there. We'll take about 30 seconds.
On to draft season. We're done with rankings. We're on to drafts. August is going to officially be here the next time we all meet up a week from today. So I can't wait. We'll even have a football game to talk about.
It's true.
We will. I got to remember to watch that.
Alrighty.
August is upon us.
All right. Real quick, we got this question coming in. Hey, guys, in best ball, Goff and Laporta or Mayfield and Mbuka? Which stack you like better, Jared Goff and Laporta or Mayfield and Mbuka?
That's interesting because I think Laporta is the better receiving option of those, but I think Mayfield's the better, like higher scoring quarterback. I think that Mayfield and Ibuka would probably outscore Goff and Laporta. So I'd take that way. But I think that's because Mayfield's doing all the heavy lifting.
I think I'd agree because of the Chris Godwin injury and not really knowing what his time frame looks like. Mike Evans, yes, we love Mike Evans, but I don't see him, torching anybody for 1,400 or 1,700 yards, right? Like we're looking at like 1,021 yards or something like that for Mike Evans this season, right?
Yeah.
Just to get over that cusp. So some of these young guys are going to have to step up and fill the void. So I don't mind Mayfield and Mbuka.
Yeah, I don't mind Mayfield and Mbuka either. Goff and Laporta, I don't mind that one either. I think this is a little bit of 6 of one, half dozen another, based off of what you're going to get off of draft capital and where you're taking these guys. It's probably a little bit of a push for me, and especially when you're talking quarterback, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end. Pushes that a little bit there as well, right? And at that point, I probably lean with the Mayfield and Mbuka just from the standpoint that. I'm taking a quarterback at a reasonable pick there, and then my in Buka you're getting late in those best ball draft dart throw type of range, whereas Laporta and Goff you're having to spend, you're having to actually be diligent about the draft capital that you're spending on that.
Laporta's going 64th overall, Ibuka's going 98th overall. So yeah, in best ball, I'd take Mayfield, Ibuka because there's a lot of picks in between that.
So, alrighty, that's I think that one's going to be the last one that we hit up tonight. Any final thoughts out there? Alrighty, appreciate everybody tuning in, chiming in. We'll be back next week, and next week we're going to start the draft strategy specials and really get rocking and rolling into that. Lots of fun. Make sure that you're tuning in to, following all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Good Old Boys FF. Best place to check out is the YouTube channel at Good Old Boys FF. And hit that subscribe, ring that bell. We've got videos coming out there. Get those notifications whenever we go live. But that's going to do it for us tonight. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.